Hi, thank you so much for tuning in to the GA4 implementation webinar presented by Duda. We are scheduled for a full 60 minutes today. The first half will be on how to transition safely. The second half will be covering key reports and how to navigate the user interface. We do have about 5 minutes at the top here to allow everyone to sign in, check their sound, grab that extra cup of coffee, whatever it is you need to do. I'm Kayle Larkin. I'll be your moderator today. I've worked in search marketing since you had to be invited to Gmail. You may be familiar with my articles on Search Engine Journal and Ahrefs. Charles Farina is here with me today. He is the head of innovation at AdSwerve. Hi, Charles.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us a bit about your role as the head of innovation at AdSwerve?
Yes. So nice to meet everyone. I've been working in digital analytics almost exclusively with Google Analytics and Google's measurement solutions for the last 10 years. I work with AdSwerve, which used to be known as Analytics Pros, which is one of Google's largest partners and actually resellers and service providers of Google Analytics 360. So I have deep expertise in pretty much anything and everything around Google Analytics, from small business all the way up to large enterprises like Tesla, Yelp, GoPro, and many others. And at AdSwerve, I lead a lot of our strategic initiatives. So for the past 2 years, I've actually been helping a lot of our company and our customers move from the old version of Google Analytics to the new version of Google Analytics, GA4. And then in my spare time, I also have been leading our privacy initiatives. I've been working on actually launching an Adobe offering. And then I play hockey when I'm not doing those things. So that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. So you actually train Fortune 100 companies on Google Marketing Platform products.
Yes.
Very,
GTM,
very cool.
Google Analytics used to be optimized, but we just found out that's being deprecated. So we can talk about that later.
All right. That's amazing. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here? Like the 10,000-foot view, if we have any listeners that are interested in a career in analytics.
Oh yeah. So I started in college. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life, and I was trying out different majors. Eventually, I decided I wanted a marketing degree, and it really didn't click for me until I had my internships. And in some of my internships, I was fortunate enough to try different disciplines: SEO, SEM, email. And one of my internships was actually with the University of Wyoming's marketing department. And I somehow became responsible for helping with their Google Analytics implementation across the whole university. And to keep the story short, I thought, like any college student, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was proud. I was training people. But the reality was, when I went to this analytics conference in San Francisco that was sponsored by Google, I realized not only did I not know anything, but in fact, I had broken the Google Analytics implementation. I had done and violated like every best practice. I
Oh, no.
tagged my own site with UTMs, like the cross domain tracking wasn't right. So, but for me, what clicked was I felt like with analytics, especially Google Analytics, every day there was going to be something new to learn. And it just made me fall in love with it even more. So for me, it all started with just trying to manage a Google Analytics implementation, and then really leaning on the community to figure out how to really use it. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years.
So cool. Really quick, I do want everyone to know Charles tweets regularly on Google Marketing Platform updates. So if you're not following Charles on Twitter yet, you might want to go and do that now. You'll be able to stay up to date and in the know with all Google Marketing Platform products pretty much as soon as things are announced publicly. I don't know how he does it, but he does it really, really well. So I'm going to drop our names in the comment section really fast. Ah, awesome. Thank you. They're on it. And we are recording this webinar today. It will be available for replay on Duda's YouTube channel. So be sure to share that within your online communities. And there will be a Q&A at the end. I see that some people are already popping in to say hello. We have people from Colombia and South Florida and Mongolia joining us today. I'd love to also know what niche you're working in, and if you're familiar with Google Analytics 4 or completely brand new. You're in the right place, and we're excited to help make this transition easier. That is the end of our 5 minutes. It looks like everyone has tuned in. Hi, Stephanie. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Kayle Larkin. I've been a search marketing consultant for just about 15 years, and I love helping business owners better understand their data to improve their marketing strategies. Charles Farina is our trainer today. He's the head of innovation at AdSwerve, where he's led hundreds of strategy and training sessions on Google Analytics 4 for Fortune 100 companies. If we could do our slide, maybe jump ahead to the agenda session. If not, I'll just go ahead and jump. Hi from Japan, hello, and Seattle. Hi, I'm in Spokane. The agenda today I'll go through really quick. We're going to focus on how to transition safely to GA4, avoiding any pitfalls in your settings, navigating the user interface, and understanding those key standard reports, and some fun stuff you can do with Explore. Before we jump into the details, we should quickly cover what's different, because this isn't as easy as hitting upgrade now on your phone and just waiting a few minutes. It's a completely new platform. So it's important to kind of know a little bit about the nuance and the differences with the platforms. So Universal Analytics is the version that we were all using for about a decade, maybe a little bit over a decade. That was session-based. 15 years? Wow. So like literally my entire career has been Universal Analytics. That was session-based, and it used hit types such as page hits, event hits. Google Analytics 4 is event-based. So all of those things like page view is now events, and that's obviously going to cause some discrepancies when you're trying to compare data sets. That's an incredibly oversimplified explanation, but that's about it in a nutshell. You can definitely dive into Google's documentation to learn more about the technical details. So Charles is now, we're going to move into how to transition, and Charles is going to walk us through how to transition safely from Universal Analytics to GA4.
Yeah, and Kayle, I think a fun fact that we were talking about before, a lot of people don't realize that Google Analytics has been around for 15 years.
Right.
And that version you mentioned, which we call Universal, has pretty much been the same from a data collection standpoint for those past 15 years. We've gotten new versions of the UI, some new features, but the way you actually kind of set it up is largely the same. And kind of what I mean by that is you can actually still use the original urchin.js tracking code that they released 15 years ago, and it still actually records and processes data today. And I can't think of like any other marketing or SaaS or any software that I can use it from 15 years ago and it still works today. So that really speaks to me to the longevity of the platform. So one way to think about GA4, a lot of people are trying to figure out what it is and why Google's doing it, is it's really the first time ever that Google is re-platforming all of Google Analytics. They've rebuilt the back end, they're rebuilding the front end. So as we're going to go through today, we're going to show you lots of different examples of the reports and the capabilities and kind of the power of GA4. And a lot of it is really because, again, for this first time, Google's truly kind of giving us a new version of Google Analytics that we've never had before. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll just kind of talk through some tips and tricks and some best practices on how to approach GA4. Whether you haven't started or you've already started, hopefully you'll kind of pick up some valuable insights. So for those of you who have never seen GA4 before, here it is. If you haven't had a chance to play with it, or you've never seen it before, it's worth noting that if you just Google the Google Analytics demo account, Google actually provides a free demo account. And they released the GA4 version of the demo account a little bit ago. So again, if you just Google the Google Analytics demo account, you can actually quickly and easily have access to exactly what Kayle and I are looking at today by just clicking on the link, and then there you go. This demo account is actually connected to a real website called the Google Merchandise Store. So another fun thing, if you have any friends or family that you'd like to share some Google goodies with, this Google Merchandise Store has a bunch of t-shirts, hats, cups, all sorts of things on here. And this is the website that Google uses, which is connected to their demo account. So kind of an e-commerce centric example. It's also worth noting on that demo site, there's also an app version. So if anyone does have mobile apps, there's even a Firebase GA4 integration that's running as well. So in here, I just wanted to kind of start from a high level that at first glance, if you've used Google Analytics in the past, this probably looks very similar to Google Analytics. But as we're going to go deeper today when we explore kind of the best practices about reports, if you just take any bit of a deeper look, you're quickly going to realize that almost everything about it's different. The reports are different, the way the data is organized, the way you navigate around, you find things, everything about it's different. But to start off with, as Kayle mentioned, we wanted to talk a little bit around implementation and kind of best practices around that. So the first thing that's important to start off with is that if you currently have the old version of Google Analytics running, it doesn't carry forward into the new version of Google Analytics. Because the data model is so different, Google's made the decision that GA4 requires a new implementation and new tags running on your website. So the short summary of that is everyone has to add new tags or launch kind of the new components for GA4. Otherwise, you're not going to have any data. And then in I think the date of deprecation is June or July of this year. Google's actually
July.
deprecating July. Thank you, Kayle. In
Mhm.
July, Google's deprecating the old version. So it's really, really, really important that if you don't have this new version of GA4 running, that you make it a priority probably this week or next week, because the real value and power, I think, of analytics, you can really get the most out of it when you're able to do year over year comparisons of your data. It's really important to try and have at least 13 months of data so that when you're doing analysis, you can account for seasonality and other sort of traffic patterns that might be impacting some of the trends or increases or decreases you're seeing. And because Google Analytics is deprecating the old version in less than 6 months, it means every day you kind of wait to get started with GA4, it's just going to take longer to get back that 13 months of data, which is kind of the gold standard in our industry of being able to, again, kind of do that historical reporting. So that's the bad news. If you haven't started, you're already behind. But the good news is that getting started is extremely easy, at least for kind of the basics and some of the fundamentals of GA4. So I would say the best way to start is, like, if you're using Duda or any kind of website out there, almost all of them have great plugins for Google Tag Manager. And Google Tag Manager is a tag management system. It makes it easy to manage all your tags, Google, Facebook, everything else. So in probably a minute or less, you can just go to your Google Tag Manager integration. You'll create a GTM account. If you already have one, it's going to be even faster for you. But the first step is just using the GTM plugin. The next step is just going to be going into GA4 and creating an account or property. And with that, what I would recommend everyone do as quickly as possible is just deploy kind of the basic tag or the basic setup. So once you implement GA4, I'll show you in your data streams. Once you create an account, this is the first page you would see on your website. and it gives you your measurement ID. This is what you'll put in Google Tag Manager with GA4. And then this is going to give you basically your page view and your traffic sources that you'll be able to pretty much immediately start reporting on. And Kayle and I were talking about this. One big change that Google made between the old version of Google Analytics and the new version of Google Analytics is that they're trying to give you more data with kind of less customization and less implementation required. So out of the box, they added this new feature called automatic or enhanced measurement, where by simply adding that one tag and spending 5 minutes using that plugin and adding this new GA4 tag, not only are you going to get your page views and some of your behavioral analytics, but Google's also going to add a variety of other things like scroll tracking, there's outbound clicks, there's even other things like forms and other parts. So these are like libraries that Google uses to automatically track different interactions like video, scrolls, and other things on your site. So for beginning your implementation, this is really step one, is just getting the new GA4 tag running on your site and then setting up this so that you're measuring some of the basic behavioral insights that are happening. And all of you should be able to easily get it started and see all that data kind of flowing in 30 minutes or less. And this is where you should start. Kayle, anything you would add?
One thing I would love for you to show everyone is when you were talking about that 13-month back view for data, can you show them how to adjust their data retention within the settings?
Oh, yes. So now we're getting into some fun tips and tricks. So this
Sorry, I
is
guess I'm jumping ahead of it.
No, this is really important. And a lot of people don't realize this. So I'm actually going to switch accounts real quick so that I have full admin access. I'm going to go to my personal GA4 account for my company. And when you set up GA4 for the first time, there's a setting that Google doesn't show you at first called data retention. In today's kind of digital world, there's a lot going on in our industry around privacy and security and other sorts of things related to data. So this isn't necessarily a new feature in Google Analytics. It actually exists in the current version, but what it's doing is much more important in GA4. So this data retention setting, for all of you who have GA4, it's something you're definitely going to want to check or look at. It's in your admin data settings, data retention. And in here, basically, it's saying that this is determining how long that Google is going to retain some of your data. And by default, the setting is set to 2 months for everyone. Mine is 14 months because I changed it. So in the free or standard version of GA4, there's only 2 options, 2 months or 14 months. And this setting actually impacts how far back you can do analysis in different parts of GA4. So there's kind of 2 sets of data in Google Analytics. There's aggregate data, and then there's kind of the raw, granular data that you use for kind of deep analysis. And the data retention setting impacts that kind of raw, deep analysis data. So if you had this data retention setting set to 2 months, there's one of my favorite parts of GA4 called Explorations. Explorations is really where all the cool new features of GA4 are. This is where, for the first time, marketers can create funnels in Google Analytics, where we can actually have path reports that help us understand how users flow. And I'll show you some tips for this in a little bit. But if your data retention setting is only set to 2 months, that means in this new fun area of GA4, where we're going to spend a bunch of time, that your date range selector will only let you have 2 months of data. There's another area of Google Analytics called the standard reports. The standard reports will have data from the very beginning of when you implement it. The data retention setting doesn't impact this, but it does impact this kind of really new cool area of GA4 called Explore. So this can be very confusing for new users. So for most of you, if you have a legal team, you'll want to check with them what your data retention setting should be, and if your privacy policy is up to date to tell your users how you're recording and how long you keep the data. But I would say most people set their data retention to 14 months because that gives you that ability to do that year over year. And if you have it at 2 months, most people will be very surprised when they try and do analysis later and they find out they can't access the data they're looking for. So this is one of the first kind of gotchas or tips and tricks of GA4, is that your data retention setting is something you really want to look at closely and that you're probably going to want to select to 14 months.
Thank you so much for explaining that. Could you go through the clicks one more time for someone in the comments wanted to know how to get to data retention again?
Yep, so this one's pretty easy. Oh, well, once you figure out where things are in GA4. So the admin in GA4 is this little gear in the bottom left-hand corner. So once you're inside GA4, you'll click admin, and then all of the property settings are in the middle. And in your property settings, there's a data setting and data retention. Another fun tip or trick is that in GA4, there's this search box. And Google has been making a variety of updates to this search box where they're trying to let you actually just type in what you're looking for, and then they'll take you to that area in GA4. So if you search for data retention in this search box, hopefully right here, there's a little gear. And if you click that, it'll take you directly to that area. You can also do that for fun things like you could type landing pages, 30 days. Let's see what happens if I type that. Here it's going to say trend of users for the page title. So it doesn't always work. But sometimes if you search different dimensions and metrics or even date ranges, it will give you actually quick reports on the right-hand side. You can see here, it didn't do either. It didn't give me my page titles or the landing page. So it doesn't always work perfect. And Google's definitely still working on some bugs. But there's another fun feature in GA4.
It's getting there. We did have one more question from the comments, and I believe you pronounce Hurain asked, do we need to delete the old universal analytics tag on our website when adding the new one?
So great question. So the way GA4 works is when you implement it and you create a property, it's going to create a separate instance versus your old version of Google Analytics. So because of that, they're going to live side by side, and that's good. It's really good for kind of data governance. So for your question, you don't need to delete it. In fact, the recommendation would be you should keep it because you want to have access to your old data. So this is my account for Google Analytics. And in here, these ones I can tell because they say UA in the account name. These are the old versions of Google Analytics. And then this just number without the UA in front for Urchin Analytics. These are the GA4 properties. So as a best practice, you would probably want to go in and rename your different properties. So I call mine GA4 or put emojis in it. And that's how I know it's the new version. And then you can rename the old versions to Legacy or Universal or whatever you want to differentiate them. But definitely keep them both there. And that's definitely a best practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Is there any other settings that you want to show us within GA4? Because I do know that the data is not retroactive. So like data retention isn't going to zip back to when you first started GA4. It's going to be moving forward. Are there any other settings you can think of that we want people to implement like today?
So from a setting standpoint, I think some of the important ones to start off with are going to be the building blocks of GA4. So GA4 is going to collect data. And then to make it really meaningful, you do need to do a little bit of customization. And my recommendation for new users to GA4 is probably to spend a bit of time on two other areas, conversions and audiences. So for me, conversions are one of the most important parts of GA4 because if we're not measuring to an outcome, how are we really measuring anything to begin with? Almost every site has something that it's built to do. Maybe sign up for newsletters, maybe sell products, maybe you're trying to promote a menu if you're a restaurant. Whatever it is, every site has some sort of objective. So one of the first places that you'll want to spend time with is conversions. And if you go to the admin conversion section, in here, what I wanted to highlight is that setting up conversions is easier than ever before. So anything you're tracking as an event in Google Analytics, with a single click, you can enable it as a conversion. So as an example, if I show all of my events, one of the automatic events in Google Analytics is scroll tracking. It tracks it automatically for us. If I wanted to, for whatever reason, have scroll tracking as a conversion, all I have to do is just turn on the switch, and then it's a conversion. Additionally, you'll want to Google how to do this because no one's going to remember from a quick demo. Additionally, Google Analytics lets you set up custom conversions very easily, and that's going to be related to audiences. So audiences in GA4, you can kind of think of this as your personas. If you have marketing personas for your website, you're going to want to set up audiences for them. So you can keep track of people engaging with support or employment or blog or prospects or customers. It helps you obviously keep track of your key segments. And in GA4, one thing that's kind of cool is that any audience can actually be a conversion. So let's say you had a thank you page you wanted as a conversion, or let's say you had a store and you wanted a conversion for people that maybe purchased $50 or more of product. You can actually create any of those as conversions. So in the audience builder in GA4, there's a brand new feature that the old version of Google Analytics didn't have called audience triggers. And this is one of my favorite features. So what this does is GA4 has a very powerful audience builder. We can basically build audiences off of anything our users are doing or have done on our website. So in this example, I'm saying I want to build an audience of anyone that saw my blog and within 10 minutes, they got to my contact page. So this is something you could never do in universal analytics, is scope things by time like this. So I can say, for example, show me people who started a checkout and completed a checkout within 10 minutes. You could do all sorts of cool stuff with time. But the part that matters for what we're talking about is this audience trigger. What this does is anytime someone meets the conditions of an audience, it actually tracks an event from that audience. And the reason that's important is because if I go back to that conversion section, I can actually select that audience event and mark that as a conversion, which is what I've done here. So if your website has like a thank you page or a specific URL you want to mark as a conversion, you'd use the audiences and the audience triggers to set up your custom conversions. So this is how you set up basic conversions using event names. And then the audiences and the audience triggers are how you would set up advanced conversions. And to go back to your original question, Kayle, the reason that's important is because if we're going to try and measure anything in GA4, without conversions, it's really hard to have a proxy of performance. But now that I have my conversions set up, I can, in my, for example, acquisition report, select the dropdown of conversions, and I can say, for example, my emoji conversion. And now I can see which traffic source is leading to the most amount of emoji conversions. Or if I want to see which traffic source has the highest emoji conversion rate, I can see clearly I'm crushing it on paid social. And again, without those conversions, none of that would be possible. So those are the definitely next steps. After you get GA4 running, go in and set up your conversions, spend some time on audiences, and that's definitely the next item on the checklist.
Very good. Thank you so much for that explanation, Charles. Those are great, how to transition safely to GA4 and the pitfalls to watch out for in specific settings that our audience can use with audiences. Moving into navigating the user interface and understanding key reports. If it's okay, I might just let you continue driving here because I think you already have, I think that one of the primary reports that people will be using up. Because a big question is like, if you're increasing traffic to the site, a lot of SEOs are focused on increasing traffic to site, and you would use the traffic acquisition report that you have up. would you tell them a little bit, because there are some differences between your traditional like universal analytics traffic report and GA4. For one, people aren't going to find bounce rate in the standard GA4 report. Now we have engagement metrics and engaged sessions. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what an engaged session is and the new engagement metrics?
Yes. So GA4, one of the things Google did when they built this is they tried to rethink a lot of the dimension and metrics and needs of marketers, and then curate and kind of customize this experience to not only meet the current needs, but also future needs. It's also worth noting that GA4 has been around. It used to be called App Plus Web for, I think, 3 to 4 years at this point, since it started. And what's available now versus what it started with is also significantly different. And what I mean by that is there's lots of more dimensions than we used to have. And if I were to show you the release notes for GA4, they even are adding more dimensions in the past few months. We just got a bunch of e-commerce ones as an example. So there's lots of new things coming. So anyways, to your question, a lot of things are kind of new and different, but also a little bit the same as what we had. So when you start off with GA4, Google has added this concept of engaged sessions to many parts of GA4. And one of my first tips is if you're looking at something in GA4 and you don't know what it is, in many places, if you just hover over the top or the title, it'll open up the tooltips. So we can see that as an example for engaged sessions, the definition of this is these are the number of sessions that were at least 10 seconds long, or had a conversion event, or had 2 or more pages or screen views. So what Google's trying to do is say bounce rate was never really a great metric, or at least they didn't think so. So they're trying to use engaged sessions as a proxy, where they're saying the user had to have at least 10 seconds, convert, or engage with 2 or more pages. So in GA4, we have a variety of metrics kind of built around that. So you have engaged sessions, average engagement time per session, or engaged sessions per user. Additionally, since you brought up bounce rate used to not be available in GA4 at all. And instead, Google was saying, use engaged sessions instead. But a lot of marketers still wanted kind of the classic view of bounce rate. So for those of you who need a quick refresh on bounce rate was historically a metric, which was people who only viewed one page and didn't kind of do anything else on your website. So they came to your website, they viewed a page, and they left without doing anything else. So after a lot of people, I think especially in the SEO community, asked for bounce rate, it's actually come back. But one of the questions is, how do we find bounce rate if we wanted to use bounce rate instead of engaged sessions? So there's kind of 3 ways that you could go about doing that. One is you could type in bounce rate at the top, and you could say, I want bounce rate by country as an example. Let's see if this one works today. So if I type top country by bounce rate, there must be some sort of bug in Google Analytics. This usually would work, but here we're seeing undefined and my bounce rate 0%. So this normally works. The second way you can do it is there's a brand new feature called the library in Google Analytics. So historically, Google has never let you change the standard reports. Everyone that would log into Google Analytics would see the exact same set of reports and capabilities, and every company and organization would also see the exact same set of reports. They were never customizable. What the library does is this is the first time where Google is actually allowing anyone to customize and curate the reports and experiences that people see when they log in to Google Analytics. So as an example, let's say I wanted to customize the landing pages report. So in the landing pages report, I can actually come in here and I can edit it. And here we can see we have our engaged sessions metric. On the right-hand side, I can actually come in and say, I want to add a metric and I want to add bounce rate. And we can see that bounce rate is actually available here. So maybe I want bounce rate, and I could delete all the engaged sessions if I wanted to, but here's my bounce rate. And now I've added this metric back in here. So this was a very long way of showing that Google Analytics 4 now has a lot of customization where they have a new way of thinking about engagement. But in addition, they still have your classic bounce rate. But if you're a marketer and you want it, you have to go through this new customization option. And Kayle, I believe you, actually, I know you wrote a really great article that we could probably share in chat about exactly how to customize these reports and add bounce rate to them. So we can share that as a resource for anyone that's looking for more on how to do that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I talk a lot about engagement metrics, specifically bounce rate, and I really loved how we can customize our standard reports and our landing page reports. I will definitely add a link to the comments for that. So thank you so much for showing us around the standard reports. Let's move on to explore, because we have about 20-25 minutes left, and I want to make sure we save time at the end for Q&A. Could you show us, because explore is something very cool and new with GA4, and marketers can do even more like in-depth analysis with these tools.
Yes. So explore is actually something that used to only be in Google Analytics 360, which was the paid enterprise version of Google Analytics that would cost you about 150,000 US dollars per year. So unless you had that kind of money, you didn't have access in Google Analytics previously to certain reports like funnels. Only the enterprise version of Google Analytics had funnels. And I think we could all agree that funnels is pretty important, right? In the free version of Google Analytics, it did a pretty terrible job of anything around trying to build a funnel or trying to understand how do users navigate across your website. There are flow reports in the old version of Google Analytics, but they're full of problems and challenges, and they also look very ugly if you open one up. So the good news is that with GA4, Google has not only added a lot of features that were only in GA360, and not only is it this explorations module, but there's also integrations. So Google has a bunch of other products which now integrate with GA. There's a BigQuery integration, which was never available in the free version. So the actual features in GA4 are substantially improved, and explorations is one of my favorite areas. So as I was sharing earlier, explorations is where, as you become a more savvy user of Google Analytics, you're likely going to start spending 90 to 100% of your time in here instead of in the standard reports. This is where the real power of GA4 is. And in here, there's basically kind of a similar version of like a data studio. If anyone's ever used data studio, it's kind of one way to think about this. In here, you have the ability to create different, what we call techniques. And essentially, there's probably 3 or 4 techniques that you'd probably be using most. Either you're going to be creating tables and doing freeform analysis, or you're going to be using the new funnels or path explorations. And I'll show you some fun examples of these. So in the path exploration, this is where Google's rebuilt our pathing reports in Google Analytics. Previously, this only worked with page titles and events, but Google just finally gave us the ability to do page URLs. But simply, this is a report to show you how do users navigate and flow across your website. So super interactive. You can also filter it. You can apply audiences to it. And one of the biggest changes is it's not sampled. So in the old version of Google Analytics, it was really hard for marketers to use these because of sampling and some of the other fragmentation that happened with it. So I'll give you one actionable example of this report. Let's say you're a marketer and you have a conversion that you care about, and your boss wants you to tell them what do users do prior to converting? What are the most common paths that lead to a conversion? If I were to ask you to do that in the old version of Google Analytics, you'd actually probably have a lot of difficulty answering that because it's not easily accessible. But in this new version of GA4, If you're in explorations and you click this pathing report, you can click start over at the top. And if you click start over, Google asks you to either select a starting point or an ending point. Now, if I pick ending point, you can pick events as an example, and you can pick any event that you're tracking. So this could be that conversion or that checkout or that form fill. So here I'll pick as an example, maybe I want anyone that downloaded a file. This is one of the automatic events that Google Analytics tracks, file downloads. And here I can look at either the events or the pages that led to this file download. And I can see, okay, which page did the download occur from? So I had 15 that were from my Search Ads 360. And prior to the Search Ads 360, I can see what did this particular audience look at before. So for pathing, this is a huge addition to help you understand how users are flowing across your website. Additionally, to show you another example, if we go back to Explore and we click on the funnels, for the first time ever, everyone in Google Analytics has the ability to create very powerful and very meaningful funnels in the platform. So this is the default funnel, but what I wanted to show you real quick is that if you click on the steps, you can easily customize these steps. So you could have this be users that see page A, followed by page B, followed by page C, whatever you want. Super customizable. It's also fully retroactive. So when you create this funnel, it works with all of your historical data, subject to that data retention setting. So make sure you have 14 months of data because 2 months isn't a lot. But in these funnels, you can fully customize this. So you can, for example, break them out by different dimensions or not. One of my favorite features is in funnels. Let's say you wanted to understand how long does it take users to complete each step of your funnel. Maybe you have a form and you want to know how long does it take them to go through that form. Again, you couldn't do that in the old version of GA, but in GA4, there's a checkbox for time. By simply checking that, Google will tell you exactly how much time it's taking users to complete each step in your funnel. Additionally, you can create audiences from this funnel. So if I wanted to create an audience of people that left my funnel on the third step, and then I wanted to use that audience to actually remarket to them, maybe in Google Ads, you can do all of that just by clicking build an audience. And then Google Ads will immediately have people that abandoned your funnel available for you to try and serve them some unique ad or offer that you want. So these funnels are super customizable. I'll give you one of my last favorite tips and tricks in this section. Another fun question is, let's say you have a funnel and your boss wants you to analyze how did that funnel perform over time. So maybe in the last year, what did you do to optimize that funnel and how has the different completion rates increased or decreased? It would be very hard for you to answer that question in a visualization with a bar chart. There's no concept of time in this funnel report. But in here, if we change the visualization from a standard funnel to a trended funnel, Google will quickly plot each step on a graph, and you can see over whatever date range we're looking at, how our funnel and each step within that funnel is performing. So I'm giving you just a taste of GA4. The explorations adds a lot of what I think are fundamental features that should have always been in Google Analytics to every user who's using it. And we're seeing all sorts of power and functionality that now exists. And all of this is available for you, again, just with a few implementation steps and making sure you have some data in the product.
Awesome. Thank you so much for showing us around standard reports and explore reports. I personally was really excited about that ability to easily make a new audience that you can retarget or serve, other marketing strategies or marketing initiatives too. So I want to use our last 15 minutes here to answer some questions. One question back to when you were talking about audiences and the settings, and this is something I've heard a lot of people be concerned about. So Tamara asks, how can I exclude bots? Do I use audiences to exclude bots? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So Bots are a little bit of a challenge right now. I find a lot of people have with Google Analytics, and I'm hoping on a personal level that Google does more to help marketers remove kind of invalid or fraudulent or non-human
Right,
traffic on the platform. So my hope is in that in a year we have some new features. Right now, it can be a bit of a challenge. So what most people I find do is when you're kind of navigating reports, there's kind of different dimensions and metrics where you can see their devices, their browser, and then like those bounce rates and engagement rates. And typically, bot traffic is easy to spot in Google Analytics because you'll see a lot of traffic with very little engagement. And then once you find it, right now, the best way to kind of segment it is with an audience. And then you just apply that audience to kind of remove it. It only removes it when you have the audience applied, though. It doesn't necessarily remove it from the data itself. So the short answer to your question is that's a great way to do it with audiences. However, I'm hoping Google actually gives us new features so we could remove it from the data entirely. And right now,
right,
there's not really a lot of features around that.
right. Good. Thank you so much. I know that that's a tough one. GA4 supposedly has settings already in it that filters out bot traffic, but you will still see some of it within your reports. So I'm hoping for that too. Um, I didn't grab the name. I'm sorry. I'm trying to go back really quick. Client Center. Client Center wants to know, is there a time delay between when I set up events and when that data starts to show in my standard reports?
Yeah, great question. So first, there's always going to be real time. So real time is going to show you the data right away. Uh, there is a whole Help Center article if you just search processing time for GA4 about how long it takes different data to show up where. In general, if you're a smaller site, you'll probably see your data within 12 hours and then 24 hours at most before it shows up in the standard reports. So those should be the time ranges between 12 to 24 hours for standard reports.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Charles. So the help article, processing time for GA4, I'll grab that link and add it to the chat. T asks, is 360 a part of GA4? Or are those two separate?
Great question. So it absolutely is. There's two versions of Google Analytics 4. There's the free version and the enterprise version. So there is a 360 version of GA4. There is a big difference between how 360 is with the new version versus the old version of Google Analytics. In the old version, it was a lot of features. Like those funnels were only in the old version, in the 360 version. In GA4, Google's actually, from a feature standpoint, the features are almost all the same. And that's a big benefit to people in the free version. They get a lot of features, again, that were only in that 360 version. Like a lot of these Google integrations with DV360 and BigQuery and SA360, people had to pay to get. And now you get them for free. In the enterprise version, the difference between 360 and free for GA4 is largely you get more limits for
Hmm.
GA4. So you get more audiences, you get more conversions, you get more parameters. But from a feature set, there isn't a lot of differences between the two.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that explanation. One question that I'm asked frequently is, why do user counts not match between Universal Analytics and GA4? And I know that that's a bit of a mammoth question, but I feel like it's important to address because I know marketers are, as they're trying to familiarize themselves with GA4, they're still leaning on that, Universal Analytics crutch, and they feel like that is the epitome of truth and the answer. And could you talk a little bit about why user counts may not match?
I'm smiling because there's honestly, the way I view it, no great answer to that question.
Right.
So they're just not going to match.
Right.
And there's some reasons why, but even when you explore those reasons and you try and account for them, what I found for a lot of my customers, they still don't exactly line up. So, and I guess to help you, instead of obsessing about users and why they're different, what we found more helpful is to look at some of the granular data itself. So focus on comparing the event counts. Make sure the event counts are similar. Make sure the conversion accounts are similar.
Right.
And then once those are in the ballpark of each other, the user counts should be similar. If they're not, we definitely want to make sure like we're looking at cross-domain tracking, that we're looking at how you're tagging different traffic sources and some other elements. Make sure there's nothing that's resetting the visitor ID. But more often than not, what it's going to come down to is just there's differences in how users are kind of represented in GA4. And I could give you like 10 different reasons, but instead, Google has a great support article on a starting point. But even then, I would just frame it as they're just going to be different. Have you experienced anything different, Kayle?
No, I try to get people to think more so about, right, they're going to be different because the way that the data is collected is different. We're talking about different things. And I've tried to focus more on like the percent change and the growth, because from a marketer standpoint, I don't really care so much if there's 10 or 20 users. I care more about if I'm increasing the amount of users to the site, and then like you said, what those users are doing once they're on the site. So I tend to think more about the lift than necessarily the exact count, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
And this, like one tip I will give you, a lot of people don't realize that there's two user metrics in GA4. There's
Yeah,
users that are total, and then there's something called active users. And this is something I think Google needs to do a better job of, because a lot of people don't realize what they're looking at. So as an
right,
example, this total users are the total users who logged an event. Let's go to the user acquisition report and let's look at, let's try traffic acquisition, and let's look at users in this report. It says the total number of active users. So this is actually the active users metric, but in the events, this is total users. And in the definitions, if we look at the tool, the active users is kind of like an engaged session proxy. It's trying to only count users who have actually done something on your website. If
right,
they came and immediately left without doing anything, active users doesn't include them in the user counts. And this is one of the most confusing parts, because a lot of reports in GA4 are actually using active users,
right,
not total users. And the old version of Google Analytics only had total users.
right.
So that's one of the biggest differences. But even once you take that into account, they're still not going to match. And that's just going to be something you have to get comfortable with.
Right. Could you, thank you. I was going to ask you to share your screen with us again, and then show us where those user counts are. I missed it.
Oh yeah, Anton,
Where
if
you
you
were
can.
just showing us. Yeah, I can see it now. I can see it now.
Okay, perfect. So what I was showing is that in the events report, look, we have total users. So it's pretty obvious that
Right,
this is the total users metric. But if I go to the acquisition report, now I have a metric called users.
right,
And you have to ask yourself, is this total users or is this active users? And this is where I'm saying that, like, I think Google needs to do a better job to help make this easier, because the only way you would know what this is if you read the tooltip. And this is actually active users. Most reports in Google Analytics are actually using active users, where you're not looking at the total user count because Google is removing anyone who didn't do anything. But you don't know that because it's not labeled as active users.
right.
It's just called users. So Google has some work to do here to make things simpler to understand.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great one. I'm double checking our comments and our questions here. Awesome. How about I'm going to stay on the topic of users, and why user counts are going to be different. Could you tell us the difference between user acquisition report and traffic acquisition report? Like, when
Oh my,
should I look at user? Am I throwing you too big of a loop? When
we
should I
we
use
could spend,
user?
we could spend 30 minutes on this. So
Well, we have
this
like five.
I know. So the 2 minute, and I have a great tweet thread on this. There's actually
Oh, good.
three different attribution types in Google Analytics. The old version, almost everything was last non-direct touch was the
Right.
attribution method. So the last traffic source got all the credit in your reports. In GA4, there's actually 3 different attribution methods. First is user acquisition. This is a first touch. So the first traffic source that the user has in the very first event gets all the credit. This is user scoped. There's a second type called session scoped. The traffic acquisition is session scoped. And you can see that because Google calls these traffic sources with session in the front.
Session. Yeah.
This is last touch. So an example, let's say I have a visit, and in the same visit, I started with SEO. I came from an organic search. And then 1 second later, I went and I clicked on a paid ad. So now I have 2 traffic sources in the same session. In this method, organic gets all the credit because that was the first traffic source in that session. And remember, in the user acquisition, organic gets all the credit forever because it was the first source, period. So this is the second one, which is last, non-direct, which is similar to the old version. And there's a third type, which is actually over in the engagement conversions. That's not confusing. In the conversions report, if you were to click on something like my emoji conversion, here we can actually see the third type. And notice that I'm actually looking at fractions or percentages. My conversions are being divided and split. This is using an event scoped. So if I had a user who had multiple traffic sources, even in the same session, everything is being split. And what is it being split by? Well, in your admin section, there is a new setting to actually define what is the attribution setting for that particular report. And here it's using data driven, and you could actually change it to something else if you wanted to. So this is an event scoped, and it's flexible and retroactive, and you can change it. So to your question, where should you be doing attribution? Depends on what you're doing. Do you want first touch? Do you want session scoped? Or do you want the new flexible DDA? I think if you're doing attribution analysis, you probably should be in the conversion reports for most things. And the acquisition reports are mostly simple for just quick answers or something like that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I was trying to find your Twitter thread on that, and I haven't found it yet. So
yes, I will keep I'll have to go back for that one.
Pop it in the comments when I can. And we have added Charles' Twitter handle in the comments for those of you who would like to follow his insights on GA4 and Google Marketing Platform products. I'm double checking if there's any questions that I missed. We've covered that. User accounts not match. That's a great question by Ward. Do you have advice for agencies needing to enable GA4 on like tons, like 400 plus websites? When people have multiple accounts, is there any way to kind of automate or speed up the process?
Let's see if I can find it real quick. So there is a community spreadsheet, and I think it's this one. Nope, there's a different one. We'll have to find it later. There is a spreadsheet that was made to do account migrations. Oh, it's right. I think it might be in here. Use the GA4 migrator for Google Sheets. This is what you're going to find. There is a spreadsheet that will help you do scaled migrations very quickly, because it can basically take a config, it can take users, and you can manage it all through a spreadsheet than trying to click and navigate through the UI. So this is something that we use at AdSwerve to help do scaled migrations. We actually built our own version of it. But using this is going to save you a heck of a lot of time and resources. So definitely check out the GA4 migrator for Google Sheets.
Awesome. Would you
I can put it in
the chat so we can add it into the comments. Thanks so much. We have 1 minute left. Is there anything else about GA4 in 60 seconds that you want to share?
GA4 is new and exciting. I guess what I'm hoping for most is we already showed lots of examples of some of the cool things you can do with it. My expectation is that this year there'll be even more cool things. So it feels to me like Google's really focused on improving ease of use, adding new features and functionalities that people have been asking for some time. So the good news is, as all of you are getting started, everything we're showing today is going to be even more exciting in the coming months as Google really starts to polish and make it even more special. What would you add?
Absolutely. I think that's it. I'm really excited for the new metrics that are coming up and all the different reports and the ability to dig more into our data and take more ownership of our data with more ideas for our strategies. Well, this concludes our GA4 implementation webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have any additional questions, feel free to connect with Charles or I on Twitter. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and happy measuring.
All right, cheers. See ya.